this guy who's going to maximize good in the world. And that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's like maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. All these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal.
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, you can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this, and I started seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. This stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. Sam goes, oh, you won our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? Is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. It never was hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was always there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So the person's not named in the report who is donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami, but that person eventually find out there were just no adults in that room, and the few adults that there were they had a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy Dan for this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west tease for a while. But I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say Z on Twitter. I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and And I'd go because it was my friends said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys in God mode on Ultimate Bet where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So he just annoying. So the famous example is Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're a publicly traded
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today, or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an
guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode? And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just
well, how does he skate on that?
There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was done. He launches Alameda Research first, which is just this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
At the end, when you're ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we was going to undo sort of everything. If you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, the money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like, or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to, but like, it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us, right? Nobody's. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? Yeah, that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace. Really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX?
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it, or something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, they're now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, you're the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the House made. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea was this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, "Hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked." As a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried, he didn't call him a fraud outright. But he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
You withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
Like the House always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred will fall for something. Doesn't mean you're safe. Like you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. They've recently been shut down. But the idea was...
Just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better...
Basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten... He lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for. Some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interview
companies, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. Appreciate your transparency. Kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that, and it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. Balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like, I forgot. It's so silly. You finally taken that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that whiz kid who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything, he's so articulate, he's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
Abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
what the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. Gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like
initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. An analogy for losing your house.
It's funny. Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say, there were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So, like, the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it, is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. Want to store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, and ultimately one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through them for like all these and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX, right, people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs. Multi-level marketing, sort of like just like hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars, do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese.
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be in the terms of service. They said results may vary. What's that about? Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately it's like, and so I realized like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology and they're very treatable kind of cancer and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer is but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But what? It's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success. The problem is, when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back, is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless.
Mm.
So you think you have all this collateral.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to, he's doing interviews with FTT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion, but like act that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So it's you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. Really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there, and all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, "What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true." Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then it's inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want. And you don't have to your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually, you believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, he's lateral like dollars or like some asset. We'll give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. And then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31.
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking.
Scandal now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep.
Through crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much screw, $10 million, or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store. A lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. You can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our. Somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called some reactions, but not much, what I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and Vic, he cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out.
Binance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
And that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame, like, onto Alameda and, like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. You're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. And it just was kind of, I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like to their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people.
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? I used to play like a variant of League. So I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. It's left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you, Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it.
Right.
It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was, you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange offering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on...
Like investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like, one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and, I have to do the LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through.
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this, do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is one of the. This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time.
Oh,
or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. Reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to. I mean, he was really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied that money for some type of crypto token, there's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in
this Coinbase? It seems like they're, legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like, put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where honestly you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. Then from the arms of one huckster to another, like it's almost to something worse. And
then when you have them on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and
I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it, and this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. Caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just the SheX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like, it was very opaque. Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people noticed, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like, they had a Serum token, which they control most of. So before, it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all, I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video.
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it.
Regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they like to get paid. It's bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars.